That's right, folks. Another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. Today we're breaking down the top streamers and flex plays for Week 7. Join us for all this and more starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. And that's right, folks. It's Wednesday. Today, by the way, I apologize for all the rotating titles. I haven't really figured out what I want to call the show, but let's just say today is really about matchup takeaways, everything you need to know up until for Week 7. And, of course, I have my man, the man who has mastered. He's basically what's the main karate guy? Sensei? Is that the thing?
Sensei Derek.
Yeah.
You call me Sensei
Derek? Derek, when it comes to the Razzball tools, it's Derek Favret. Make sure you go follow him across the board at Derek Favret, Derek_Favret on Twitter. Derek, what's going on, man?
Yeah, doing well. Had to miss last week. I was on work travel, but I'm glad to be back and looking to get ready for this week.
Yeah, so by the way, last week I couldn't do it without Derek. I got emotional. There was a lot of I had to watch The Notebook just to get the emotions out. And I actually did a solo show, by the way, on rest of season slot versus wide strength of schedules. And by the way, that's a fun one. That's evergreen. Go check it out on the channel. And by the way, go check out the rest of season slot versus wide tool now available on razzball.com. So if you want to see, by the way, if you have a spare kid to trade away, trade for AJ Brown. I'm telling you right now, AJ Brown, his slot versus wide rest of season schedule is absolutely amazing. Honestly, I don't know what the offer would be to get AJ Brown, but man, get AJ Brown. That's all I can tell you. His schedule is insane rest of season. Before we dive into today's show, which is Week 7, streamers and flexes, we're going to dive into some of the breaking news. And obviously, if you joined the show yesterday on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel, my Matt and Sky talked a little bit about this. But you know what? Me and Derek want to chat a little bit about this as well. You know, don't take all the news, guys. Like, be a little considerate. They could have taken one and we could have taken one, but no, they had to be selfish. They took it all. So you know what? We're doing the same. All right. And I want to talk quickly about the Davante Adams and Amari Cooper. Let's jump into Davante Adams first, Derek. What were your first thoughts about the trade, the fantasy football impact, and everything about that?
Yeah, well, we knew he was going to go somewhere, and the Jets were the likely spot. I don't know. I don't think it fixes all their problems, to be honest with you. He has the relationship with the quarterback, has the relationship with the coordinator. So, I mean, it is a decent fit for him. We should see better production from him than we did in Vegas. But, if I'm a Jets fan, I'm not dancing, in the streets because I don't think this fixes their problems. So, fantasy-wise, it's a boost for him. I don't think it really affects Garrett Wilson all that much, honestly. But I think everyone after them, it does. So it becomes a two-headed monster in New York between Adams and Wilson. Everyone else, the pass catching after that, I'm really skeptical on.
So the first thing I think a lot of us haven't talked about yet is the Raiders fallout and like understanding like, okay, Davante Adams is gone. Aiden O'Connell's the starter. Do we care? And I think one of the things that I do care about, I think Brock Bowers, and me being an anti-rookie tight end guy, has a real chance to finish as a tight end one rest of season. Like he is going to get bombarded with targets now, especially with Jacoby Myers being in and out of the lineup. Trey Tucker is a more interesting name. Listen, now if Gardner Minshew was quarterback, maybe I would. His gunslinger mentality would make things a little more fun. But I think Aiden O'Connell's good enough to support one, maybe even two guys, especially a tight end. And so I think Brock Bowers becomes an interesting trade target with the news because there's just going to be more consistent targets when you take a guy like Adams off the field. The other aspect of this, too, is like the running games. I don't know if like maybe like a Zamir White or Alexander Madison, if the offense gets worse now, probably does. Maybe you're fading those guys rest of season. I don't know, but I feel like in that case, maybe more targets head down their way. We'll see. But on the flip side, I did want to look at this because Aaron Rodgers for nearly for the last 8 years hasn't had two alpha wide receiver ones on his team in a long time. The last time you have to go back to 2016 when he had Jordy Nelson and Davante Adams. I know it's a long time ago, but at the same time, I just wanted to take a look because 2017 all the way up till now, he didn't have 2 alphas. He's got 2 alphas. That season, he supported a wide receiver 2 and a wide receiver 9. So 2 top 10 wide receivers. And there's a real opportunity here. Like Aaron Rodgers has the talent to support 2 top 10 guys, especially because his mastery of this offense. And on top of that, Todd Downing, ironically enough, I know we think about him as the Titans OC when everybody basically, every Titans OC was like, hey, Derrick Henry, take the ball 30 times. But when he was with the Raiders, ironically enough, himself in 2017, he had Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree. Now, that season, they only played 9 games together, over 50% of the snaps. Crabtree was the wide receiver 18. Amari Cooper was the wide receiver 26. Now, granted, Derek Carr versus Aaron Rodgers, but I think at this point, it really tells me that the baseline is that they're both going to be top 24 guys. And I do think Aaron Rodgers is good enough to support 2 top 12 guys. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do agree. Like I said, I think it is a 2-headed monster there. And, with Rodgers, and now he's kind of limping around with an ankle injury. I don't know how much that's going to limit his upper mobility, but no, they've got a stretch of games coming up. I'm looking ahead, week 9, week 10, week 11, Houston, Arizona, Indy. All these are really favorable matches for Aaron Rodgers in particular. And by that time, Adams will be in place. But yeah, I agree with you. I think both of them. I'm not worried. If I'm a Garrett Wilson owner, I'm not worried about this at all. Like I said, if I own anyone else on the Jets, even the running backs perhaps. But yeah, I agree with you. I think he can certainly support it, and just the familiarity, like you said, that coming in there, those short, quick passes, knowing where he's going to be is going to be telling, and that's going to be, successful. So yeah, if you got Adams, you're probably feeling pretty good right now.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't have the numbers to back this up, but the Jets have kind of struggled a little bit in the red zone. And like Davante Adams is like one of the best red zone receivers. And so like he's already going to fill a role that isn't being occupied, where touchdowns or just drawing more attention away from
Right.
Garrett Wilson
Right.
to help him flourish in the red zone. I am not selling, and Matt said this on the show yesterday. He goes, I think there's a buy low window on Garrett Wilson. People will panic because of the news. And I think I actually kind of agree. Like it wouldn't hurt to reach out to it. And then listen, on the show for rest of season schedules, we did talk about the next 5 weeks being tough for the Jets. But if you're a team that is 4-2 or better, like Garrett Wilson, the rest of season schedule is actually pretty nice for the Jets receiving core. It just has a little bit of a tougher stretch over the next maybe 2 to 3 weeks, but things really open up over the second half for the Jets. So definitely like the buy low window there. The other one is Amari Cooper. And I did say, and listen, I love the lip service. Stephon Diggs is gone, and now they're spreading the wealth, and everybody's getting theirs, and no one's selfish. And then week 7 rolls by, they're like, hey, Amari, can we take Amari Cooper? We need a number 1. Like, you need an alpha, and that's fine. Bills, at least you realized that you needed an alpha. And this little experiment was fun, but you know what? Like, this is just something we need in this offense. Now, Cooper should come in, and I did talk about how Ken Dorsey, his OC this year, was the OC last year before he got fired with the Bills. So I was like, maybe there's some level of continuity for Cooper, that the offenses will have some terminology or some type of scheme correlation so that he can get acclimated quicker. I mean, Amari Cooper is no stranger to changing teams, so that should help too. But I think that there's something there between the Dorsey connection to Buffalo as well. So he might be able to get up to speed quicker than we think. That being said, the Bills have the toughest rest of season out wide schedule, and I don't see him playing a lot in the slot with Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid on the inside. What's your thoughts about Amari Cooper rest of season?
Yeah, well, anytime you can get paroled from Cleveland, the
Right.
wide receiver, then your arrow is pointing straight up. But yeah, I agree with what you said. The Bills wanted to experiment, with Shakir and Coleman and Hollins, and it was clear that they needed the alpha, like you said. And Shakir and Coleman are certainly viable secondary options. And now with Cooper there, that kind of opens it up, takes a little pressure off. So I think overall, I think we're really going to, in fact, if you're a Josh Allen owner in particular, you've got to really like this because there's been a lot of pressure on his shoulders. He's been some weeks where you've kind of questioned if he's still the number one quarterback or number two, behind Lamar. So yeah, you're feeling pretty good about this as a Cooper owner and in a couple teams. I really like this move. You did say they've got the toughest, strength of schedule moving forward, but even still, the prospects as a Cooper fantasy owner is better than when he was on the Browns. So I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I like the move. I like the move for the Bills. I like the move for Cooper, and I especially like the move for Josh Allen.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last one I just want to talk quickly about is Russ potentially being the starting quarterback. I don't think it impacts like Pickens and, because granted, Pickens hasn't really been great this year. A lot of the stuff Justin Fields has been doing is with his legs. I'm interested to see. I think the Steelers their thought process is do we have another level? We have Russell Wilson. Let's see if this offense can go to another level. Granted, I think Fields has been playing really well. He's been great for fantasy, but at the same time, I can understand if you're a 4-2 football team, you're like, let's see what we can do here. Let's see if we can level up even more on offense. Don't care too much if that's the thought process, but last year we saw Courtland Sutton play perfectly fine with a guy like Russell Wilson. I don't overly concerned about everything, but what's your thoughts? Is there any ripple effects for the skill position players for the Steelers?
Yeah, maybe a little bit for someone like Freiermuth, maybe, but overall it's fine. It doesn't. Again, maybe some of the movement of the ball that Fields was doing with his own feet. Russ isn't going to really do that, so he's going to look to throw the ball. So there might be more targets. Do they turn into receptions and touchdowns? We'll see. But there'll be more targets for someone like a Freiermuth, I think. So there's a little boost there. But overall, I don't really see that move being all that consequential either way. For any of the players that were rostering there with Pittsburgh. And if I was the betting man, I would probably say that Fields will be back under center by week 12 at the latest. So it doesn't really move the needle so much for me. It doesn't change, my feeling on any of the players either way, frankly. But I do hope to see a few more targets to the guys that we roster in fantasy.
Gotcha. All right. Before we dive in, we got a couple people joining the show as always. Jamie, good to always seeing you, my friend. What's going on? He wants to throw a couple. Jamie, people are going to start assuming you're my new burner account if you promote me, but I did have a very nice top 5 running back finish this week. Granted, I could not rank any other position, but at least I got something going with running backs. And by the way, kickers, number 6. And by the way, I personally feel that's the one I'm most proud of because the metric is working. I love to see that. Well, at least it worked last week.
Well, you are a kicker whisperer, so
Listen, I don't know. What can I tell you? Listen, I can when I talk about, I have created a high floor kicker analysis. I don't know how to explain it other than that I have built so much security. I never have 2 points from a kicker anymore. It's been wonderful. And then sometimes I'll have winning weeks. Like I'll have a kicker drop 17. Austin Seibert last week was a beautiful man. He did some wonderful things for me last week. I loved every second of it. And by the way, we got Cooper getting away. Listen, and by the way, we didn't really talk about the Cleveland Brown impact. You have Jerry Jeudy there. You have Elijah Moore. You have David Njoku. Is there any honestly, I don't know how you think Watson gets better from this. And I'm not overly excited for Jeudy or Moore. Maybe Njoku? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, is Joe Flacco there? No. Then no, I'm not. I don't know. Maybe Chubb coming back. If he comes back, the first year is going to be tough anyway. But any semblance of his former self, maybe that opens up a little bit the passing game. But No, I still obviously there's not a lot of excitement there in Cleveland for the passing game.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into it. Today, we're going to break down some of the key matchup takeaways heading into week 7 that helps us identify some streamers and flex spot plays. And what we're going to do is break down our tools. And by the way, if you haven't gone over to the fantasy data tab, I'm telling you right now, go check it out on razzball.com. We have great tools and resources to help you set your lineups every single week. We have the slot versus wide, the flagship, points per game allowed tool. We have rest of season slot versus wide schedules. We also have the home and road splits, the win versus loss split tool, the touchdown tool, everything that's really fun to help you kind of figure out if you start a player. Let's dive into the first one. And the reason why this one's important is the Jacksonville Jaguars have been absolutely awful, allowing the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. We all know that. But the question now is they have Drake May in week 7. So the question is, Derek, are you comfortable starting Drake May this week in this extremely good matchup?
Yeah, in a 2-quarterback league in particular, yes, he makes for a perfect super flex, in my opinion. In fact, I have him in one of my teams as a super flex. The Jaguars are giving up the most touchdowns and the most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and the third most to wide receivers. We're not going to talk too much about the wide receivers there, but just the fact that that the defense is vulnerable. And for someone like May, I mean, he's not only throwing the ball 243 with 3 touchdowns. He did have 2 picks last week, but he's also doing it on the ground as well. 5 rushes for 38 yards. So, yeah, he's definitely a start this week in 2 quarterback leagues. Absolutely. 1 quarterback leagues, I'm probably not. There's probably a better option out there for you, but he should be rostered because there's a lot of excitement there. I mean, I kind of see him. In fact, I said it in our preseason show. I kind of see Drake May as a young Josh Allen. Frankly, I don't know if he's going to evolve into that, but he kind of reminds me of a young Josh Allen. So there's a little bit of excitement there, and if you have him in a 2-quarterback league, I think you definitely want to play him this week.
The one thing you got to like about Drake May is he runs a little. 38 yards rushing last week. That's always going to be a cheat code. Now, he did throw for 3 touchdowns later in the game, a little bit of garbage time. It is what it is. The Jags situation, this is like the week where if you have Drake, especially in Superflex, this is the week to start him. Jacksonville doesn't get much better than Jacksonville. But look at what Caleb Williams just did to them. I think he is not a top 12 quarterback this week. I still think that, yes, Douglas and not even Polk anymore, but Bourne and I forget the kid's name, starts with a B, Boyette. The Hunter Henry, the receiving core isn't elite or good. So he's going to have to compensate a little bit. He's got young guys in that receiving core. Douglas is good. I like Douglas, but he's an undersized slot guy. Don't know how much workload he's going to be able to handle. And so, but I do think, yes, 2 QB, he makes sense, but I don't know if I'm going to be streaming him. A player that might make a little more sense is Matthew Stafford this week, who's coming off the bye, might have Cooper Kupp in the lineup against the Raiders. The Raiders this season have allowed the 12th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, but they're back-to-back weeks. They've allowed really big performances to, average quarterbacks. Bo Nix, QB 11, Justin Fields, QB 8 for fantasy purposes. Is there any way you're going to be starting Matthew Stafford as a streamer this week?
Only in an extreme case, probably. Like you said, the Raiders, they're 8th best versus quarterbacks in yards per game. Middle of the pack in touchdowns against. So, if you look at the last 2, Fields and Bo Nix, I mean, they held them under or right around or under 200 yards. Only Nix got a couple of touchdowns. Fields didn't really do much. So I think Stafford is, being more of an established quarterback, he's a little in a better position to navigate. Still doesn't have his elite receivers back yet. So there is that. But, if you go to look at other tools, his home road splits, he's a little bit better at home, only about 5%, but a little bit better at home. And then I even went a little bit deeper with him in the last 2 years. home games after after his bye week. So in the last 2 years, he's had home games after the bye week. Last year, home versus Seattle, 190 yards and a touchdown. San Francisco the year before, 187 and a touchdown. So, you would think coming off a bye, nice refresh, ready to go. He's really hasn't been showing either that he's exploding. So is he a better start than a Drake May as a stream? Yes, for sure. Do I like the matchup versus the Raiders? I do. Am I expecting top 10 numbers from Stafford? No, probably not.
So who's your streamer quarterback then this week?
My streamer quarterback this week, I probably would go with Kirk Cousins at home versus Seattle. That would be a streamer that I think I would like a little bit better than the two guys we've talked about today.
Okay. All right. Let's jump down to the running back position. And of course, the Carolina Panthers are just God's gift to running backs. And I've just been getting crushed. And by the way, if you look at fantasy points allowed per game, it's like a 4-point difference between Carolina and number 2 right now. The reason why we're bringing this up, everybody knows Carolina is a great matchup, but Brian Robinson should be back this week. The question is, Derek, can you start both Washington Commanders running backs in this matchup?
To me, I say no. Austin Eckler, I mean, he had a chance last week to really establish himself. He had 2-to-1 snaps over Jeremy McNichols, but 9 rushes for 21 yards. I mean, he did catch 4 of 5 targets for 47 yards to give you almost 11 points in PPR. But I mean, that was his time to really establish himself as a viable backup, and he didn't do it. And so now if Robinson's on the field, he is limited today in practice. He's trending up. I can't play Austin Eckler, frankly. There's a couple other, the waiver. If you watch our waiver show, you heard about some other options at running back that people are getting excited about. And although I'm not all that excited about them, I'm more excited about them than Eckler. So it is a great matchup. I hope Robinson is 80% healthy and really takes advantage of it. But no, I'm not streaming Eckler this week.
I'm actually going to say yes, you can. And it's mostly because the Ravens are one of the toughest matchups for first running backs. And the Panthers are giving up twice as many fantasy points as the Ravens do. Now, I think Brian Robinson's the play. Like, where you beat Carolina is actually on the ground. They are 803 rushing yards. That leads the NFL in rushing yards allowed to running backs. 12 touchdowns. That's insane rushing touchdowns. That's 4 more than the next team on the list. But they're only like middle of the pack in passing game. Now, granted, that's because the Panthers are the Panthers, and they're always going to be down. And the game flow suggests that Brian Robinson should have a big week against the Panthers. So I think Brian Robinson could be the start of the week. Check those player props and make sure he's got a decent line, because it could be an interesting play across the board. But I do think Eckler could be in play this week as well. He has looked good. He does look like he has a pep in his step that he didn't have last year. So I think that Eckler could be a flex if needed this week.
Yeah, I would give you that. I mean, he does look like he has a little bit more in the tank this year than he does last year. But I will tell you, if he doesn't do it this year, let's not even talk about him again. This week. This week.
Yeah.
If he doesn't do it this week, then regardless of his workload, how he utilizes his workload, if he doesn't do it, then we need to write him off, frankly.
It's a PPR play only. He's been fine in PPR. He has scored, let's see, he has scored double-digit fantasy points in every single game in PPR, but he hasn't scored over 13.7. So he's between 10.2 and 13.7. So he offers you a floor because he's getting a handful of targets each week. I think I think if he's going to get you probably 10 fantasy points as his floor, then this matchup with the ceiling versus Carolina, he's someone that I'm willing to play, because if he gives you 10 fantasy points in PPR, You're not going to lose your week because of that.
Yeah,
but
okay.
if he blows up against the Panthers, then you might have won your week.
I will give you that. If you're looking ahead in weeks 11 and 12 and then 14, but that's their bye as well. So weeks 11 and 12 are heavy bye weeks, if I recall. And they match up against Philadelphia and Dallas those 2 weeks. And so you'll be looking, everyone's going to be scrambling for running back help. And so, yes, if Eckler's still healthy and you can expect 10 to 12 PPR points in a week where there's a lot of buys, then, okay, granted, I'll give you that. He's a good play that week. To me, it's not this week, though. But again, if he can't do it this week, then, I'm probably not looking at him until those, break glass in case of an emergency weeks.
Yeah, I hear you on that. All right, let's jump down to the next one. It is start your running backs versus the Patriots. We're bringing this up. Travis Etienne is looking pretty questionable. Does Tank Bigsby enter RB1 territory in this matchup against the Patriots, who allow the fifth most fantasy points to running backs, sixth most rushing yards, fourth most rushing touchdowns?
Yeah, and Tank Bigsby, if you look at our home road splits, 57% better at home versus on the road. And New England travels to Jacksonville for this one, like you said, fifth most.
They're in London.
Well, they are in London, but they stayed in London though, right? So it's
it's home. It's home away from home.
It is. They stayed there over the week, and I'm going to count that as a home game for them. They go there every year. So, but that said, yes, I think Tank Bigsby is a really good streamer this week for the reasons you said. He was outsnapped last week by Johnson. I mean, both he and Etienne were outsnapped by Johnson. But if you go back to week 5, I mean, he 26 fantasy points in week 5. I mean, that's something you can't discount. He didn't have it as much last week, but it's there. The explosiveness is there. It's a game. If the Jaguars have any entertaining any chance of competing for a playoffs, they need this game. They need to use their weapons, and frankly, Bigsby is one of their weapons. So I expect a pretty good game from him this week. Again, I think it lines up pretty well for him to kind of get back to the way he was in week 5 against Indy, where he had 101 and 2 touchdowns. I'm not expecting that, but I'm expecting something in that range. So Bigsby's definitely a streamer for me.
I am throwing out last week's performance. I don't care. The Jags got the doors blown off them. They already lost Travis Etienne. And by the way, Dearness Johnson's probably going to be the preferred passing game back anyway in this duo. So when they're trailing big, they already lost one of their starters. They're down a bunch of points. Like, they're not going to try out Tank Bigsby. That's a Dearness Johnson time. So now they are going to be, quote unquote, at home against one of the worst teams in football. Right? So, like, this, by the way, number 4 in our adjusted line yards matchup metric this week for offensive lines. This is it. Like, Tank Bigsby. Like, if you've been stashing Tank Bigsby, by the way, you probably didn't start him. Maybe you did. I did say 2 weeks ago, right before, I said I'd rather start Tank Bigsby than Tyrone Tracy, which Tyrone Tracy went off against Seattle, but Tank Bigsby went off even more, so it made me look good, I guess. But a lot of people haven't had a chance to start Tank Bigsby yet. This is the time you've been waiting for. Do not stress about Dearness Johnson. That was game flow. I guarantee you that this is going to be a big week for Tank Bigsby, top 12 running back. Get it in.
Yeah, and just to really accentuate that point, like you said, the Patriots have been, somewhat dismal, but they have been actually relatively strong versus running backs in the passing game. In fact, they're top half of the league. Versus running backs in the passing game. So, yeah, another reason that we think you can think that Tank Bigsby is going to have a pretty decent week and is a good streaming option.
So we're skipping wide receivers because that's what we do on Wednesday, folks. And make sure you join us again on Wednesday on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel as we break down the slot versus wide points per game allowed tool and the biggest matchup upgrades for week 7. And also make sure you join us every single Sunday. Derek, are you going to be there on Sunday?
Well, it's actually my wife's birthday,
Oh,
so
jeez.
we're still negotiating that. So
Man, that's how big the Sunday Live show is, folks. He's negotiating with his wife
that's
on
right,
her
on her
birthday.
birthday.
If that
So
doesn't get you to go to our show, then I don't know what will. But make sure you join us 2 hours before kickoff every single Sunday as we do the Sunday Live Start Sit show. It's a lot of fun, a lot of laughs. It's a good time, so make sure you join us there as well. All right, number 5 is start your tight ends against the Packers. This one is very interesting because Dalton Schultz hasn't really had a big season yet. But the Nico Collins injury and now the matchup. The Packers have been one of the better matchup for tight ends, second most fantasy points allowed. Dalton Schultz has hit waiver wires in some 10-team leagues. I've seen him. I actually had a chance to get him in 2 different leagues this week. The Packers allowed the 7th most receptions. Allow 7 receptions to a tight end in back-to-back weeks. So the Packers have really, you got guys like Jair Alexander out there, and maybe they could slow down guys like Diggs. Is Dalton Schultz kind of like, how confident are you in it as a start this week?
well, in the tight end landscape, what is confidence, frankly? But I think you've got to be relatively confident with him. If you go to our some of our tools, like you said, the Packers, our defensive targets allowed tool, the Packers are tied for second most tight end targets. So they're throwing a ball to tight ends, and like you said, they're having success. So in this case, Schultz is a play. He's definitely, if he's not your starter, he's definitely stream worthy. I will caution though, if you look at our touchdown receiving tool, he's only over the last 10 games, so it goes back to last year. He's only getting 16% red zone targets. I don't like that. I want that to be higher, and maybe with Nico Collins still out, maybe we see a little bit more of that, moving forward. But and this would be a good week to do it. But yeah, the matchup is good. The tight end position is still a struggle. So anytime there you can find some optimism for a tight end, you really need to run with it. And in this case, this fits the bill.
By the way, I do want to make sure everybody knows that when we're talking about these tools, this is essentially what we're doing to dive into the analysis today. If you go to football.razzball.com, you click on the fantasy data tab. This is where you can find all the tools we're talking about right now. The home versus road splits. And by the way, I'm not joking to you. I was talking to Derek off air about this. The home versus road split tool. I wouldn't have started Daniel Jones last week knowing how bad he is at home, and the tool would have shown me that. And these are great ways to help you kind of find streamers, with that last start sit question. But the one tool that Derek just brought up is the defensive targets allowed by team. I have not found this data anywhere other than Razzball. And so I did this for us because I thought I always wondered, like, how many targets does a defense allow by position? Couldn't find the data anywhere, so I decided to put it on Razzball. But this is a really cool way to figure out, okay, well, how are NFL teams attacking defenses? And Derek just brought up tied for second in targets allowed to tight ends, Green Bay Packers, as you can see here. When you're looking at this 24% target share, maybe that's not the highest, but still top 10, 7th highest rate amongst or tied for 6th. So this is just a really great way, a great tool to find, if you're really struggling for streamers and flexes and you're like, where can I find extra data to help me solidify my roster? I'm not joking. I love the fantasy data tab on Razzball, not because I spend freaking hours putting it together, but because it actually is really good data to help you that is unique to us. And we do appreciate you guys are using it. All right. The last one for the show today is start your tight ends versus the Ravens. Now, the Ravens defense is legit. Good at stopping the running backs. Starting to get a little better in the passing game, I guess, but they're still very vulnerable to tight ends. Cade Otton this week, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are facing the Ravens. Cade Otton is definitely someone that could be a streamer this week. You have the Ravens who allowed the 5th most points to tight ends, 9 PPR points or more to a tight end in 4 of 6 games. Is Cade Otton a streamer tight end for you this week, Derek?
He is. And in fact, just going back to what I just said about Dalton Schultz and our touchdown receiving tool, when you look at the comparison, you compare the two of them and contrast them. Cade Otton has a 24% red zone target share, for for his team. So to me, that's something I want to target for sure. I'd like Cade Otton this week. His home road splits, he's better on the road, but when your quarterback's thrown 15 touchdowns on the season, he's playable. Your tight end is playable, especially in a good matchup like this. So definitely, I like Cade Otton. In fact, you might see him in my DFS and props article this week because I think the play really allows for some upside there. So yeah, look for him in my article next week or later this week.
So this is where you get the data from. If you go to, I'm not even showing it. Yeah, so if you go over to the touchdown tool, by the way, Derek's talking about right now on the fantasy data tab, you can actually filter by position if you want to narrow it down, just get an idea. This is where Derek's talking about the target red zone share. Basically, when they're playing in the game and they're on the field, we basically calculate how many targets they're getting when they're in the red zone. And this is really fun. I mean, Mark Andrews, talk about, things starting to turn around for him. I mean, 42.9% is huge out of him. Josh Wiley, huh? That's interesting. Got to remember these guys, some of these guys in some cases are playing limited. They might be in a game here and there and they get a target and the team's not in the red zone a lot. So it's inflated a little bit. As you can see from his regular target share, it's only 7%. So slight inflation. That's where you got to kind of use the tool. But Cade Otton is top 8 in red zone target share, which is surprising. You guys are like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So clearly Baker Mayfield is comfortable with him in the red zone, which is great. And by the way, this matchup, Ravens are going to probably put up points. Cade Otton, interesting streamer this week. All right, Derek, before we close out the show, why don't you tell what you got upcoming at Razzball and everywhere else you got where you write your content?
Yeah, every week I do a DFS and go over some of my favorite prop plays. And, surprise, I get this information from these tools, that we're talking about. So, so far, I tell you, I like I said, Bobby and I were talking off air, and I've actually been doing pretty well with my prop betting. So maybe it's worth a look to see what I'm looking at, and if you want to partake a little bit as well, then do so at your own risk. But I've been doing pretty well.
Sorry to cut you off, Derek, but everybody goes on and talks themselves up, and everyone's like, you got to go do this, you got to do that. You're actually winning using the tools, and you're like, hey, if you feel like it, if you feel like you have the time to go check out, it's like, instead of being like, hey, it's working for me, you got to go do it. I love how reserved. You're like, hey, listen, yeah, it's working for me, but you know what? I don't want to force you. If you feel like you have the time, you should go check it out. That's how we do. We don't need you to go do it. If you don't want to go check it out, that's fine. We'll just keep putting the money on our end. No worries. But Derek, I love how it's the non-salesy pitch. That's what got me. I'm in. I'm going to start using our tools more because I'm
all for sharing the wealth. I'm all for sharing the wealth. And but you've got to do it. All the data is there. We teach you how to use it. We point you in the right way to look for things. It really is user friendly, and just go on there and use it. And if you have questions, come visit us on Sunday morning, and we'll help you with it. So we're all about the fans.
Even on your wife's birthday, we'll be there for you.
That's right.
That's right. But thank you for joining us once again. I want to thank you for being on the show. By the way, make sure you subscribe to the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. We're also doing a bunch of stuff on IG and TikTok. And, of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com. And, by the way, check out all the great start-sit tools that we have over there. Make sure you go check out the premium projections that Rudy does on the back end. He does a lot of great work with all his data as well, if you ever want to do that for Razzball. And make sure you join us on Sunday for the live start sit show for 2 hours. Make sure you jump on. We just have a lot of fun. We do weather updates, injury updates, everything you need to know up until kickoff. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. You can follow me at Bobby LaMarco on Twitter. I want to thank my co-host, Derek Favret. You can follow him, Derek_Favret on Twitter. And thank you, by the way, for joining the show, folks. We are out of here.